Hello and welcome back to the Debrief live here on the Blood Red channel. I'm your host Edward K and I'm joined today by Liverpool.com's very own Matt Addison, and we're coming to you following the Reds' final return to Premier League action. It's been a long wait and boy did they deliver with a 3-1 win over Aston Villa. Dominated the first half, let Villa back into it a bit partially in the second half, but a fantastic goal well taken by Stefan Bajcetic to seal the win. We'll start, Matt, with what that result means for Liverpool. Obviously, we desperately needed that win to start that climb back into the top four. How important was it that they got it?
Yeah, I think it's really important. I think, if Liverpool are going to make the top four comfortable for themselves, these sorts of games are the ones that you've got to go and weather a bit of a storm sometimes. And I think they did that pretty well in the second half. I'm sure we'll come on to the substitutions and the sort of things that happened within the game that meant that was the case. But yeah, it was really promising. I think that there was a number of performances individually that were a lot better than what we've seen. I think for the most part, Fabinho and Trent Alexander-Arnold, Virgil van Dijk as well. I think probably the three of those were the three really that really underperformed in the first portion of the season. I think all of them were miles off, particularly Trent and Fabinho. And to see all of those three perform better was really good. And I really do think it's a really tough place to go. If Darwin Núñez had finished a couple of those chances in the first half, Liverpool could have been absolutely away and would have won the game by half time. Obviously, didn't take those opportunities. Had a little bit of a scare at the start of that second half, but generally speaking, I think to go and score 3 goals and play as well as what they have done. Obviously, a couple of years ago, we'd have just expected this to be the case for Liverpool, but it just hasn't been like that this season. This was the kind of reasonably routine to a certain degree. Obviously, there's always going to be chances that Aston Villa get when they're at home. I think they've got enough quality and the new manager bounce and all the rest of it. It was always going to be a tricky game. Liverpool had to go there and win it, and I really think that this was the hardest really of the Christmas fixtures. I know Leicester are obviously a decent team. They've been heavily beaten today already. That's coming up next for Liverpool. That's at home as well on Friday. Brentford away isn't going to be easy as well, but I always thought that Villa away would be the trickiest of those 3 matches, and for them to have performed really well and obviously got the 3 points, I think it's a really, really good start and really promising really for the second half of this season.
Yeah, it's certainly the start everyone wanted to see and the late Christmas present that every Liverpool fan was wanting. But you mentioned there more than a few misses from Darwin Núñez tonight. It was sort of his typical, enigmatic performance. There was that leave for Salah early on that caused the collision between Mings and his keeper. There was the volley when it's dropped from about 100 feet in the air first time. Do you think it's a matter of time before he gets more clinical and starts converting these chances? Because, watched Analysing Anfield earlier this week on the channel, and they were saying about how last year he was one of the most clinical strikers in Europe, and obviously he's still bedding in at Liverpool, and that's very much not the case. But do you think it is just a matter of time before he finds his finishing boots, or is there cause for concern there?
It's really strange, isn't it? I think, with a performance like today, it would be easy to focus on the missed chances. And obviously, when you spend what could be a record fee for Liverpool, if all the add-ons are met, he is going to have to start taking those chances at some point. But it's not like he's not scored, or I saw a couple of sort of comparisons to Peter Crouch in the sense of, he might get one and then suddenly he starts to get a bucket full. But, he has scored an all right number of goals. I think, sort of 1 and 2-ish so far this season, which you think, he's getting a bit of criticism and the Aston Villa fans are on his back, and I can understand why people get frustrated with him. But, at the same time, it's not a bad starting point to come from. He's getting in the right positions. He's kind of doing the right things up to a certain point. And like you say, the number of goals and the sort of clinical nature of his game at Benfica, you'd think that if he does get one, possibly that there is that ceiling and there is that player in there. So it'd be really interesting, I think, to see if he does get a goal and can kind of kick on from that and use that momentum. I think we kind of saw that a little bit just before the World Cup break. Maybe that's been disrupted a little bit, but at the same time, he was man of the match on Amazon, and I can kind of see why that was the case. He was involved in lots of things. There was still a few stupid moments. I mean, there was so many times where he was clearly 3 or 4 yards offside and didn't seem to realise it. Things like that, I think you can be frustrated with. But at the same time, the third goal comes when Aston Villa fans are jeering him and laughing at him because he's almost put the ball out of play. Keeps it in, does well to feed Stefan Bajcetic. Obviously, he does most of the difficult work for that. But just things like that, little moments like that, I think, it's not a goal. It's not, a moment that's going to be clipped up and put on Twitter, like some of the reverse things of him missing and things like that are. But yeah, honestly, I think it was an all right performance from him. I'm not worried about him, put it that way. I think there's a lot to be there, still unlocked, but at the same time, like I say, he's kind of at a higher point, I think, in his Liverpool career than a lot of people will give him credit for. And if he can kick on, Liverpool are going to have one of the best players around, because the chances he gets and the chaos that he causes and all the things that he does on a football pitch make you think that surely at some point, sooner rather than later, those are going to go in. And even if he misses 3 or 4 but scores 1 every game, that's still going to be a pretty decent sort of strike rate. So yeah, lots more to come from him, but I'm not as worried or concerned or laughing at him or whatever it might be. There's been lots of different reactions, but I do really think he will come good, and hopefully that can be the case sooner rather than later, and we're not sort of kept waiting much longer for that to happen.
Yeah, I think one thing that's for sure not going to change is obviously he keeps getting in the good positions, and he is definitely a chance magnet. But Liverpool obviously not the only side with chances throughout the game. Even though we were the better team in that first half, Villa still had plenty of chances, and especially in the second half, Liverpool's defence, do you think they were showing signs of not having played together for a little while?
I'm not sure what it was really, to be honest. I think sort of the first 15, 20 minutes of that first half, there was just a few more gaps and a few more spaces. I think it's probably one of those that does happen, to Liverpool, even over the last 2 or 3 seasons. That's probably been the case. It's just that they've gone on and won the game fairly comfortably, or they've scored in the right moments, or they've been, enough goals ahead that it just doesn't really matter, and you don't really notice it. So again, I'm not massively worried by that. I do think there was, a couple of really, really brilliant substitutions from Jurgen Klopp. I think you could kind of see that Liverpool's midfield wasn't particularly sort of getting hold of the ball and doing what it was needing to do. Obviously brings on Harvey Elliott and Naby Keita, and takes off Thiago and Oxlade-Chamberlain, who I thought were 2 decent performers. Actually, Oxlade-Chamberlain did a lot better than probably a lot of people might have been expecting him to. But I think that the substitutions really changed it. Obviously, Bajcetic scores almost as soon as he's come on as well. But particularly that double change with Elliott and Keita coming on, it was just the perfect moment really for them to be introduced. And, you've got to have the options available to use those substitutions and show those little moments of genius. But Jurgen Klopp got it right. He didn't have loads of choices on the bench. I think the lack of depth at the moment with the injuries that Liverpool have got isn't ideal. But to make those changes, switch the game, really killed the momentum from Aston Villa. And from that point, Liverpool were reasonably comfortable again. Certainly, obviously, once they went 3-1 ahead. So, yeah, I think it's hard to put your finger on it. They just didn't really start particularly well. I think that the first half was much more like the Liverpool midfield of last season. I was halfway sort of thinking, possibly is this it now? If they switch, can they do this for a full game and just really lock down that midfield? That would have been the perfect thing to see. Obviously, Thiago, Fabinho and Henderson was the first choice 3 last season, which we saw them do that. Not really seen it so far this season, but there were a few gaps, there were a few opportunities, but I still think for the 3 of those collectively, and certainly for Fabinho individually, that was probably the best we've seen them so far this season. So again, it's not a bad starting point to try and improve upon.
Yeah, and on to Mohamed Salah now. Obviously, raring to go after missing out on the World Cup and not being in action properly for quite some time. How important do you think it is that Liverpool, he didn't have his most thrilling night tonight, but he managed to get that goal. And how important is it for Liverpool that he manages to just keep it ticking and keep getting the goals in?
Yeah, it's massively important for him. I think that the rest, he was one that you kind of looked at and thought would benefit most from that. He doesn't miss many matches. I'm sure he'll play pretty much every game for Liverpool until the end of the season. So the fact that he's had this opportunity to have a bit of a relax and a refresh, I think that's no bad thing. I think we will see that sharpness continue. And I was a little bit sort of underwhelmed, shall we say, on Thursday with him. He didn't really touch the ball too much against Manchester City, but this was kind of the real proper version of Mohamed Salah again, and we were seeing him in dangerous areas. I think he linked quite well with Henderson and Trent, which that triangle that we saw last season was something that Liverpool again haven't really had so far this season. So yeah, it's early days. We can't really judge it too much off this, but he was in the right place for the goal, took that well. A few other moments as well. There seemed to be always 3 players around him, as there always is. But I think, as long as Darwin Núñez and Mohamed Salah are sort of together and not miles apart as they have been up to this point at certain times in the season, I think Liverpool will be there or thereabouts. I'm fairly confident, I have to say, about getting into the top four, and I think Mohamed Salah is a large part of that. You know with him that you've got those guaranteed goals, and you just want one or two of the chances that fall to Darwin Núñez to fall to him, because if that was the case, then Liverpool would have won pretty easily today.
Yeah, Salah managing to grab that all-important opener, and that was followed up, obviously, by Virgil van Dijk with a pretty decent strike on his weak foot. Obviously, I think the goal is still his for now. We'll see what the dubious goals panel have to say about it, but how good was it to see the big man back at the heart of the Liverpool defence after what was a decent World Cup from him going out to the eventual winners?
Yeah, I think he did as much as he could at the World Cup. I'm sure he would have wanted to have gone further. Obviously, his first major international tournament and all of that sort of thing. But it was one of those where he went out and it obviously wasn't his fault. There wasn't really much more he could do. It wasn't like there was going to be a hangover from that. I think it'll just sort of again have helped him refresh. He's got that out of the way. I do wonder with him for the first few matches of this season. I know he'd never admit it and it's impossible to tell, but I do wonder if possibly the World Cup was in the back of his mind. The fact that it was his first tournament, you think maybe is he kind of playing inside of himself for a little bit of the start of this season. But I don't know, maybe that's unfair on him, but certainly his performance at the start of this season wasn't perfect. He was a lot better today, I think, than probably most games, if not all games that we've seen from him. Seemed to kind of be commanding and dominating and that kind of thing, which, again, it's one of those similar to Fabinho and Trent and all the others. It's kind of a normal thing from them. It shouldn't be something that we have to talk about. It should have just been the case all the way through this season. But yeah, a big boost to see him, obviously, at both ends having a bit of an impact. So yeah, fingers crossed again that can work in his favour. And I think for him and Matt today, again, similar to the midfield, there were a couple of opportunities that Villa got, but that's going to be the case. If you're playing away from home at Villa Park, you kind of expect that to be the case. And I think they dealt pretty well with what happened in the game. Villa didn't cause them too many problems. Ollie Watkins had a couple of moments, but nothing more than that, really. So yeah, fairly happy with that. And I'm sure he can kick on and get back to his previous levels.
Yeah, I think it was just a glimpse of those previous levels tonight. Obviously, it was a pretty dominant performance from him at the back alongside his longtime partner, Joe Matip. But you mentioned a few of the substitutes already. I'm going to bring you on to Stefan Bajcetic, a pretty unbelievable cameo from him. We usually find ourselves talking about his composure in the centre of the park, which he, again, showed tonight. But how about that for composure in front of goal?
Yeah, 18 years of age. I mean, it's just incredible, isn't it? It's a brilliant moment. And again, like you say, he's been so composed. I think if you had to sum him up in one word, that would be the word, really, wouldn't it? It's just so cool and calm. And, to take that ball, go around the goalkeeper and then lift one into the back of the net is really, really impressive from him. I think we're going to have to get used to seeing him playing for Liverpool. I think he's going to have a pretty big part to play over the next few weeks. In particular, I think you'd look at the FA Cup tie against Wolves, for example, in a couple of weeks' time. I think, I'd be surprised if he didn't start in that one. There's going to be other moments as well, though. I mean, he's trusted. Obviously, Ben Doak trusted as well. Liverpool don't have loads and loads of options. We don't know what they're going to do in January yet, but yeah, they've got a real gem in there. I think he was really good, obviously, with the goal, but like you say, further back as well. He's the kind of player that you'd look at and think, in a game where Liverpool have maybe lost a little bit of the control and Villa are coming back into it. If that happens again in future, obviously you've got Keita, you've got Elliott, you've got a couple of other options, but he's another one that you can just trust him really to just put his foot on the ball. Don't give it away. Don't do anything silly. I don't think it was the best sort of introduction to him, if you like, on Thursday against Manchester City. I don't think we kind of saw the true version of what he can bring. But, against the lesser sides, lesser than Manchester City, so basically anyone, I think he's going to be a real asset to Liverpool for the next few months, the rest of this season and beyond. I think there's a really, really good player in there. And he's not going to be the solution to Liverpool's midfield troubles. They still need to go out and get another one in January, but he can have a real big role to play. And yeah, it was a great moment for him. I'm sure, we'll see plenty of replays of that goal in future years.
Yeah, great moment. A first Premier League goal for him, and it was a first Premier League appearance for Ben Doak. What a moment again for the youngster, Matt, in what is becoming something of a breakout year for him, isn't it?
Yeah, again, a brilliant player, young, confident, doesn't have any fear. And I think we saw that the one sort of thing he did in the game was take on Luca Dean and go past him like he wasn't there. So I think that's just, again, his game summed up really in one moment. You think of Ben Doak, what does he do? Well, he gets the ball, gets his head down and just runs at you. And I think, I'd like to think that as he gets a bit older, that won't be something that's kind of coached out of him, or it won't be something that he stops doing. I think Liverpool do lack that a little bit. We've seen in the past with Sadio Mane, he'll just get the ball, stop, and then go at you and beat you and just have far too much pace and physicality. And I think, I'm not comparing the two players, obviously, but I think, Ben Doak has kind of got that, which maybe Luis Diaz has it, but probably not many other players has it, with the kind of, the ability to just dribble and go at someone and just have that speed and the confidence really to just be so direct on the ball. And again, he's another one that you think very, very young, but over the next few weeks, I don't think it'll be from the start. Even, in the FA Cup, I'd be surprised if he was a starter for that game. But I think we are going to have to get used to seeing him as well. I think there'll be, a good few cameos off the bench. I think, in a game like, an Aston Villa where they're having to chase, there's bits of space in behind, there's, abilities to kind of get into those positions. I think, he's one of those players that is just going to excite people. You can give him the ball and he can take the ball up the pitch. A little bit almost like what we saw from Adama Traore earlier in the day for Wolves against Everton. You just give him the ball and he just drives, and he might not sort of come up with something at the end of it. That might have to come, a year or two down the line. But at the very least, he gets you up the pitch. He drags you away from the danger areas and puts the ball into the opposition penalty area. So yeah, really, really promising from him. I've loved watching him for the academy this season, and I'm sure he's got a big future ahead of him. But I've seen a couple of comments already saying drop Nunez and put him in there. That is not going to happen, but I do think we will see a good few minutes of him over the next few weeks.
Yeah, Doak sadly not managing to get that goal today that would have made him Liverpool's youngest ever goal scorer in the league. But the future certainly looks bright for him. Hopefully the immediate future is bright for Liverpool, Matt. But that is all we've got time for today on the debrief. So for now, from myself and from Matt Addison, it's goodbye for now.